Being a female mixed martial artist in the modern era is simultaneously easier and harder than it's ever been. On one hand, women's MMA actually exists within major promotions in a substantial capacity when it didn't used to. And with the advent of social media, you now have the potential to reach millions of fans globally without even having to get to the big leagues in the first place. On the other hand, the global MMA fanbase is accessible of insulting and misogyny that doesn't even really respect the concept of women competing in mixed martial arts outside of 2 or 3 GOAT level fighters, which leads to incidents like this happening to serious competitors like Kayla Harrison.
Арман, вот эта вот девочка, которая рядом с тобой сидит, сколько бы палок ей кинул, брат?
Парочку.
My boy!
There are very few female fighters that have escaped the constant game of hot or not that's at play within MMA's overwhelmingly male fan base. And unlike other sports where promotions and commentators will at least try to keep any acknowledgement of the competitor's physical attractiveness in a professional space, MMA, and especially its premier organization, actively embrace the game.
Mackenzie Dern hasn't had ice cream in a while. She looks fantastic.
Jeez.
Wow.
All right.
Where is Chris Barnett?
Waiting on Chris Barnett.
She is driving a dump
And-
truck. My goodness.
Hey, I told you, she's a
Driving
linebacker.
a dump truck.
Yes, it's funny to us when King Green and Laura Sanko acknowledge that Mackenzie Dern and Norma Dumont have big asses. But there's a reason things like this are looked down upon in other sports, and it's because these women are here to be mixed martial artists, not eye candy between the men's fights. Some fighters embrace the UFC's porn-brain marketing and feel comfortable in that space, but for women like Kayla Harrison, the idea that she's always being diminished to how attractive she is or isn't to the men watching her fights can become psychologically damaging.
And so I didn't think anything of it. It was fine. My website email were kind of like flooded. All of these Russians were like, do you know what he said? And they asked Armin, how many times he would sleep with me in much more vulgar language.
That's not what she's there to be. Going viral as a woman in MMA is also a double-edged sword, because what goes viral is almost always related to the beauty of the fighter in question, not what she does in the ring. The most recent recipient of the MMA fanbase's Gunnar Award is real-life Chun-Li Mona Kimura, a Japanese kickboxer who went viral for her stunningly effective use of the sidekick, reminiscent of the Street Fighter character. But from looking her up on YouTube, you'd be convinced she went viral for looking cute. I do not trust a video with this thumbnail to educate me on the kickboxing prowess of Mona Kimura, which is a shame because Kimura's penchant for spamming sidekicks to the head is genuinely fascinating, and could be a gateway for people who wouldn't normally be interested in watching combat sports to start. So I've taken it upon myself to spotlight Mona Kimura and analyze her fights and career, minus the gooning.
The motion picture you are about to see contains actual early films of Bruce Lee.
One of Bruce Lee's most famous quotes goes, "I fear not the man who's practiced 10,000 kicks once, but I fear the man who's practiced one kick 10,000 times." It's a principle that shows up again and again within combat sports as a whole. George St. Pierre's double leg takedown, Floyd Mayweather Jr.'s shoulder roll and counter right, Roger Gracie's cross collar choke, Dustin Poirier's guillotine.
It looks like he might have this, guys. That is so...
It's tempting to be a jack of all trades in martial arts. You sort of need to be one to defend against the countless styles and techniques that are coming your way, but being a master of none leaves you vulnerable. You should be able to do everything as a student of the game, but every fighter needs that dominant strategy that they can rely on to break their opponent. Interestingly enough, Bruce Lee was referencing the sidekick in that original quote, which is what the young Mona Kimura has already achieved a level of mastery with. Kimura currently competes for the Japanese kickboxing promotion Krush in their 114-pound women's flyweight division. Krush acts as a feeder for K-1. Fighters will typically cut their teeth in Krush, then graduate to K-1 main card or fight internationally in Glory Kickboxing or 1FC. Krush uses a K-1 style kickboxing rule set, which means combat consists of punches, kicks, and knees, with elbows being barred from use, a very limited clinch, and an emphasis on clean striking and damage. The rule set rewards distance control and punishes sloppy entries and excessive clinching, meaning that jabs, teeps, side kicks, and all weapons of distance management are supreme in the promotion. A strong record in Krush will demonstrate a fighter's readiness for global superstardom, and Kimura has already shown both in spades. Her Krush debut was against 1-4 Io Giwara, which Kimura steamrolled in under 2 minutes. She didn't even really get to show off the sidekick much. Ogiwara was rushing in to close the distance, which got her punished with counter strikes repeatedly until she finally got dropped one too many times. It was obvious that Kimura was good enough to be more than a can crusher. Her next fight came against the 40-year-old Yuka, who also held a questionable record, but at least had enough experience in the ring that she could bend Kimura if it turned out that her hype was overblown. Kimura immediately starts working behind that sidekick, which she sort of uncoils like a snake and aims at her opponent's head in midsection. She stands out very imposing for the weight class 5 foot 5 inches tall, which already puts the onus on her opponent to close the distance, a task that gets much harder after Kimura puts her fence up. What makes Kimura's use of the sidekick so effective is that it's an all-in-one weapon. Kimura is flexible enough and has good enough balance that she can use the kick as a jab, since her leg is longer than her arm, and the heel of her foot can generate more power with less commitment than throwing a jab or a hook. She can just keep a shorter opponent at the end of her range with minimal exertion. At the same time, the kick acts as a defensive barrier. The first thing Kimura does when the fight begins is to condition Yuka by throwing the sidekick to her dome repeatedly. Yuka can't close the distance on Kimura without eating a heel to the face, so she's forced to stay on the outside, where Kimura can still reach her head pretty easily. Yuka's also the kind of fighter who makes someone like Mona Kimura look very good, because she has a closed up, turtled up guard that Kimura can use her reach to land punches around, while Yuka is forced to be a sitting duck. Kimura can even use the sidekick to snake through the middle of the guard and land that way, leaving Yuka with pretty much no defensive options, as well as no way to safely attack. At this point, Kimura is in complete control, and can cruise to a decision by sapping Yuka of her energy with sidekicks to the body, and the occasional heel to the face that she uses to stop Yuka's forward pressure, and open up with punches behind it. I think it's in this fight where it becomes obvious that Kimura's style isn't a gimmick, even though she makes a few defensive mistakes that better opponents could capitalize on down the line, like when she leaves herself open for Yuka's lunging strikes. Her style is built on consistency and sustained success. If she manages to patch up those holes and enter this flow state every time she fights, Kimura will have a very hard time losing a decision, and that's exactly the kind of kickboxer that Krush wants to foster. Mona has a very frustrating style that tires her contemporaries both physically and mentally, as they grow more irritated with trying to find their range in the face of Kimura's constant pokes and teeps. It's actually reminiscent of Bellator turned UFC fighter Michael Venom Page's style, who keeps a bladed stance and engages in these in and out blitzes that both hurt his opponents and escort him out of danger at the same time.
When to explode the top. Oh, wow, lead right hand. He's giving up. Referee, he's giving up. It's over. Michael Venom
comes to life only in theaters. You can experience the legend like never before. Street Fighter, rated PG-13.
Mona's next fight, as of 2025, is her most recent one. On June 27th of this year, Kimura took on the 41-year-old Totoko Ozawa with a 7-11 record, which is better than Yuka's at least. It's hard to gauge if Mona's improving or not when she's constantly being made to crush cans. It's the same problem MVP had, where he was consistently scoring these spectacular knockouts on janitors and landscapers, but was seemingly robbing himself of actual improvement by not fighting higher level competition. Eventually he paid for it when he fought former Bellator welterweight champion Douglas Lima and got flatlined in the second round. Kimura takes this opportunity against Ozawa to just start styling on her. In an attempt to counter Kimura's sidekick, Ozawa comes out with a cross-arm guard. Kind of a mummy guard too, like George Foreman used to employ, with both elbows tucked inward. Not protecting her head, so much as she's just occupying space in front of her torso. You'll see this guard used when a fighter is dealing with long linear strikes, like the ones Mona throws. The purpose of this guard was to absorb damage from the kicks on the arms instead of having them hit soft tissue, and to jam Kimura's sidekicks by extending her forearms and preventing Mona from getting full hip extension, basically turning the kicks from strikes to shoves. This guard fails because Kimura gives it no respect and starts kicking at it anyways, which still hurts Ozawa even though most of the impact is absorbed by the arms. Kimura then switches targets to the body, which really hurts Ozawa, and forces her to step in when she doesn't want to, or else risk getting sidekicked from the outside for the remainder of the fight. The guard does allow Ozawa to close the distance on Kimura much more effectively than her other opponents did, but she isn't able to land anything because it turns out Kimura is also just a really good pure boxer. Whenever Ozawa steps in, Kimura uses her jab to pop Ozawa's head back, and circles out with a right hook. Since Ozawa's guard is purely defensive, she, much like Yuka, is left as a sitting duck on the outside. Kimura can just blitz in and out with her hands and land on Ozawa at will. No sidekick necessary. Once Kimura dismantles Ozawa's defense, she just starts flowing. Straight punches, body kicks, hooks, jabs. Ozawa gets bled for the rest of the fight until the ref stops it due to the cut that's developed on Ozawa's forehead. Even though you could say that Ozawa's strategy did expose that Kimura's kickboxing would remain dominant in the event that her sidekick gets nullified, that's not really what we were shown. Mona brute forced Ozawa's guard with the sidekick and then peppered her with shots from the outside because she knew she could outclass her in every area. Fighters don't stop using dominant techniques when they get defended against. They abandon them after they get punished. Due to the skill gap between Kimura and her competition so far, that's something we've yet to see. The question of how Kimura operates at such a high level at just 24 years of age arises. The answer to which, beyond the fact that she's been training her entire life, is that she's been sharpened by high-level competition before she even started Krushing Cans and Krush. No pun intended. She won multiple national junior karate championships, then transitioned to boxing, where she became a multi-time Japanese amateur national champion and finalist, competing at the highest domestic level. By the time she had entered international competition, Kimura had already logged years of amateur experience across both striking disciplines. Most consequentially, Mona represented Japan in the 2022 IBA Women's World Boxing Championships against Italy's Real Testa, who has more professional boxing wins than Kimura's kickboxing opponents have had fights, combined. Right away you can see how much Kimura's improved since this performance. Gone is the distance control present in her crush fights. Testa quickly takes control of the center and starts landing landing on Kimura. Mona's jab is weak, and Testa starts landing punches over it that send Kimura stumbling from their impact. Mona's setup game is non-existent as well. She's winging out punches to the head without any bodywork to set them up, and it feels like she's just reacting to Irma instead of fighting with any kind of solid game plan. Kimura was entering in straight lines with limited feints and a predictable rhythm, which doesn't work against an Olympic medalist like Irma. Every time Kimura tried to win an exchange, Testa let her come and fired tighter, faster counters, which led her to win on efficiency rather than volume. Testa eventually lands a hard combo that hurts Kimura and causes the referee to wave the fight off. Very little of her performance here can be used to judge her current form, but it's interesting to note how easy it was for the 5'9" Irma Testa to control the ring. All of Mona's subsequent kickboxing opponents have been shorter than 5'5", so it'll be interesting to see how her distance management and ring control hold up when fighting someone who can match her physicality. The IBA fight is mostly there for me to prove that Kimura isn't an industry plant, and to show you how the loss affected her style going forward. After this, Kimura would focus on range denial instead of trying to win exchanges. In none of her crush fights do you see her just rush in without establishing her range first. She prioritizes side kicks and jabs to create a style that never allows her opponents to set their feet, so they can't land on her with consistency or power. After bludgeoning Ozawa, Mona gave a post-fight interview where she called for a title shot. Winning the Krush Women's Flyweight title isn't a participation trophy. The lineage is legit. The first champions, Sayuri and Kana, are legendary figures, and more recently, stylistically conservative champions like Noriko Ikeuchi have taken the reins of the division. At the time of the Ozawa fight, Noriko was still champion, and it makes sense that Kimura wanted the next shot because she is Ikeuchi's nightmare matchup. Ikeuchi is generally a reactive fighter who likes to read, block, jab back, and bank rounds. Kimura would melt through Ikeuchi's tight guard and stop her forward motion before it even started. It'd look exactly like Kimura versus Yuka did, minus the height discrepancy, at least in theory. Unfortunately for Kimura, Ikeuchi was dethroned 2 months later by the Greek 19-year-old Sofia Salakadou, who is stylistically a much harder matchup for Kimura.
Ken, what do you see beyond your fist? My fate.
During round 1 of the contest, Ikeuchi had barely started her workman-like strategy before Salakadou began using her head like a speed bag. Sofia's style actually leads to the same outcome as Kimura's style, albeit in a different way. Instead of using sidekicks and rangy attacks to prevent her opponents from setting their feet like Kimura does, Sofia never allows Ikeuchi to find her rhythm by simply clubbing her to death and punching through her guard for the duration of the fight. It's obviously more technical than that, but not by much. There are multiple moments where Sofia just frames off Ikeuchi's head and sends concussive shots straight down the pipe. According to Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face, and Sofia successfully beat plan A, B, and C out of Ikeuchi's brain with endless hooks, straights, and thunderous body blows. Whenever Ikeuchi puts her guard up, Sofia just punches it as many times as necessary for it to break. She seemingly began to slow down during the end of round 1, but in round 2 she starts throwing everything at 100% again, just showing Ikeuchi no respect at all. The most impressive thing about this fight was Ikeuchi's chin, because she takes so many clean strikes to the head, including like a dozen front kicks without going down. There was some pretty questionable judging during the match, an issue that pervades all forms of martial arts, as round 2, the clearest round of the fight where Salakadou did the most damage, but scored a draw, and round 3 was given to Ikeuchi, leading to an extra tiebreaker round where poor Ikeuchi was made to suffer even more brain damage despite the results of the first 3 rounds being pretty clear. Salakadou versus Ikeuchi is one of my favorite kickboxing matches, and I encourage everyone to go and watch how much of a brawl it becomes. Women's MMA in the West is being disrespected more than ever, and it's nice to have a reminder that the increasing popularity of martial arts among women is a blessing to the game. We watch sports to see athletes routinely do what seems impossible to us. It's inspiring to watch normal individuals rise to become superhuman, and when we compare real-life fighters like Mona Kimura to fictional characters like Chun-Li, it's an acknowledgement that we're getting closer in spirit to what we once thought was only possible in arcade cabinets. It's up to the Mona Kimuras and Kayla Harrisons of the world to show millions of women all over the globe that fighting is in their blood, and in that way they really do become real-life Chun-Lis. If Kimura is Chun-Li though, it might mean that Sofia Salakadou is Ken Masters, because she has a solid chance of recreating Evo Moment 37 when Kimura eventually gets that title shot. Kimura thrives when her opponents are far away and the kickboxing is clean, while Sofia specializes in doing the opposite. If Sofia manages to walk through Kimura's fence and starts landing bombs like she did against Ikeuchi, it would force Kimura to recalibrate her entire strategy, and that's when we'll find out how good she truly is. Sofia definitely shows a weakness with how often she throws with reckless abandon, and Mona could absolutely capitalize on this with body kicks to sap her energy and counter shots when she leaves herself open. Either way, we're in for a pretty great kickboxing match, and for a potential superstar making performance for Kimura's clean striking or Sofia's violent brawling. The timeline of when or if this fight will happen is very murky, after Sofia had to pull out of a K1 title fight due to a lumbar disc herniation in October. The ice Kimura has brought to the sport isn't lost on Krush, but scheduling Sofia for a bona fide K1 title fight and then rescheduling the bout against reigning K1 women's flyweight champion Saho for February 8th means they're also extremely high on Salakidu's potential star power. The outcome of that fight will affect Kimura's title hopes pretty significantly, jumping from Krush to K1 to defeat the number 2 ranked flyweight in the world and capturing a title in the flagship promotion would most likely put Salakidu out of Kimura's reach for the foreseeable future. The Krush belt would most likely get vacated, which would set up Kimura for a title fight against a different opponent, maybe against a returning Ikeuchi. I would imagine that Sofia falling short against Saho would force a title defense against Kimura, but if the injury combined with the rescheduled K1 fight and the subsequent recovery take too long, it might mean that Kimura crushes another can in the meantime, or that Sofia gets stripped and Kimura fights for the vacant title anyways. Kimura versus Salakidu would be a massive deal for K1 and Krush, so outside of either fighter taking a loss that completely halts their momentum, it would seem that the two fighters are on a collision course. Saho versus Salakidu is the deciding factor on how quickly we'll get it though, so I'd recommend that you catch up on Saho and Sofia's kickboxing back catalog in preparation, and take a break from watching Dana White hang out with the Nelk boys. It'll show you a brand new appreciation for martial arts.
俺より強いやつに会いに行く。
ストリートファイター2スーパーファミコンで好評発売中。カプコン